Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third annual Bison Video Blog Awards Show. Along with Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. It must be a big deal if Big E joins us in studio and with a suit coat back from Frisco, Texas. He's looking styling and profiling today.
Yeah, very nice. The show is also known as the Give the Love to the Offensive Line show by Big E. So,
well, that's why you are farm tough.
Oh,
right?
It's really hard. Jeff Kolpack looks at the stats. Oh, this Carson Wentz guy is pretty good and writes it down. Wow, you were really thinking outside the box.
Man, we haven't even started yet. We're already going at it here. This is, like I mentioned, the third time we've done this. We'll give out 6 awards: Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Team MVP, the Most Improved Player, the Player to Watch for 2016, and our Highlight Reel Play of the Year. Now, to try and diverse up some of the answers here, so it's not like the Academy Awards, we have the same guys winning every award. There are some different picks, so you can harass us later, and I'm sure people will in the comment section once they see our video post. I will say there are some, you could definitely have some debates on some of these categories. I know I did when I was looking over this after I saw what you guys were voting for.
well, I think certainly Offensive Player of the Year is one that can really put a number of players in there. You can have the Stick, Wentz, who missed too many games. You have the backfield. You can even throw some receivers in there too as far as the discussion.
I mean, for Carson Wentz played 7 of the games this season, and you could argue he could be Offensive Player of the Year as well.
That's why I think there's no clear-cut guy, because no one had the John Crockett nearly 2,000 yards rushing year. Carson Wentz only played half a season, whereas he might have thrown for maybe close to 3,000 yards and thrown 20-some touchdowns. So the fact he played 7, you have Easton Stick who played 8 games and played very well for those 8 games, makes it very debatable this year.
All right, well, let's rock and roll. I turn to the award-winning sports writer to lead us off with his pick for Offensive Player of the Year. Who are you going with?
Well, I'm going with Easton Stick, and the reason is that he came on at a time when the Bison desperately needed something to click, because they were coming off the loss to South Dakota. They lost their quarterback, and all of a sudden here comes a freshman. And look what he does. There's a nice strike to Shepard. I mean, he was able to throw the ball with 61% efficiency, completing 90 passes, and he was the second leading rusher there for a while. Ended up third. I mean, here's a guy, he averaged 5.9 yards a carry from the quarterback spot. Watch this. This is against at SIU.
Yeah,
Don.
that's a huge play.
I mean, he takes this to the 4. I mean, that's a quarterback who just made things happen at a time, like I said, when they needed it the most.
And Big E, his first rush went for a touchdown at Indiana State, and we knew he could move. We certainly didn't know he was this fast and this ingenious as well, with maybe the ugliest pass of the year that went for a touchdown to R.J. Zadowski.
He just had that extra gear. He made that safety miss. If he got in open space and if it was him one-on-one on a safety or cornerback, he could make that guy miss and explode into the end zone. Another signature play for him was that touchdown against Montana to start the playoffs. Bob Stitt during the week had said, at quarterback position you might have an advantage as far as maybe poise and experience. First play of the game that he just bolts up the middle for 50-plus yards and a touchdown. And I think that play, as much as any other play, put a stamp on that game.
Kolpack, that was also in his first game, thrown across his body, which I'm sure Chris Kleiman or Tim Polasek would ever endorse, but he made a play to Zadowski there, and that was another huge play in that first game at Indiana State.
He scored at Indiana State on his first official carry when it really, I mean, here's a guy that he started off with a bang.
Yeah. All right, Big E. Kolpack may have already hinted it away. Last couple of years, your Offensive Player of the Year has been alignment. Billy Turner and Joe Haeg. What are you doing this year?
Going Joe Haeg again. He was the one constant all year. And you can say what you want about the skilled players, and they were great. But when the offensive line turned it up a notch, that's when that offense really started to roll and churn out production. And the thing about Joe Haeg, what was great about him, you never heard about him, which is great for a left tackle. You can't remember him getting blown by or a game where he had problems with a pass rusher. I just think he was the rock of that offensive line. He was the rock of that offense when you talk about, Wentz being hurt, Stick coming in and out. A guy like King Frazier started slow and really came on at the end. I think as the year went on as a whole, Joe Haeg was the most consistent player on that offense. That's why I'm picking him.
Yeah, that's a good point. He makes a great one, though, that we never called his name out, saying, boy, this defensive end just owned Haeg, and that didn't happen all season.
I remember he had one illegal procedure penalty during the year, so no, just kidding. Yeah, very deserving guy, very deserving, I think, potential draft pick, too.
You look at it too, Big E. When they got going, Easton Stick got into the lineup. They had 300-some-odd rushing yards at Southern Illinois, and you mentioned they road graded teams for the remainder of the season.
And, and Haeg was part of it. I just think the whole offensive line, when Carson Wentz went down, said, it's time for us to prove, Kolpack called him a Big Ten offensive line at the beginning of the year. Well, the first few games, they didn't look much like a Big Ten offensive line. I think they're, at that point, we have to help out the young quarterback, and I think they did.
My offensive player of the year is, I know, going to get some eyebrows raised. I'm going with the Moorhead product and Chase Morlock. I thought he had a fabulous year. 10 combined touchdowns, 5 rushing, 5 receiving. Big E's already giving me a hard time since he missed some time with an ankle injury, and he did, Kolpack. He battled injuries, but he became a threat in the passing game for Carson Wentz. The game against Weber State, he was tremendous. This play worked all season long, even to the championship game against Jacksonville State. He was able to run the ball with authority. He blocked well, and anytime he got into free space, he made things happen.
Well, and plus, he's just a tough kid, too. I think when you have a guy like that with his mentality, and that's the West Coast offense. It's just a physical mentality, and I thought he epitomized it.
354 rushing yards on the season, Big E. He also finished with 286 receiving yards. I mentioned the 10 total touchdowns, which is the highest for anybody on the team that was not a quarterback this season.
And, let's start a new term, maybe amoeba mode or Swiss Army knife mode. He could do whatever you needed him to do.
This was an amazing play
They
against
could
Weber
put him in the slot. He could you could play him at fullback because he could block. He could catch the ball. He could run. So I agree. I mean, just think of how big a year he could have had if the ankle injury would have happened. Because I remember early in the season, he was really quick through the hole, and that kind of, he struggled with that a little bit with the ankle. And then at the end, I think he got back to full health. And he was just a guy you could count on in a number of different scenarios. Another guy was a special teams guy, just had a lot of value throughout.
You mentioned, Tip Housley told us this way back in spring ball. We're going to see Chase in different positions on the field. That certainly came to fruition in 2015.
And that's not going to change next year. I mean, he's a multiple guy who can play that slot receiver. Maybe fullback next year a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. All right, Biggie, you're going to lead off with Defensive Player of the Year. This almost seems like a slam dunk to me.
Well, I mean, I'll be like Kolpack and go with the obvious. I did give some consideration to C.J. Smith because he did a good job of shutting down the other team's big targets. You never saw a receiver go off on the NDSU defense when he was in the lineup. That first game in Montana would be the exception. I got to go with Nick DeLuca. Led the team in tackles, 135 tackles, 3 sacks. And to me, he had the signature play of the championship game. It's 10-0. He drops in the coverage, makes a diving interception on Jacksonville State quarterback Eli Jenkins. And at that point, I think Jacksonville State was like, this is not like any other defense we've faced all season. They go up 17-0 and the route was on. But that interception to me was a trademark play.
That was also a big one, Kolpack. Richmond going for it on 4th down and DeLuca leaping into the air. And I think Richmond became aware of number 49 in the middle there.
We knew number 49 had speed coming into the season. We knew he had some athleticism and the size, and I thought he just put it all together. The one thing the coaches were harping on him for this year was he needed to show more leadership, and I thought he did that. And at the and when they honored the team at halftime at the South Dakota State NDSU men's basketball game, who got the mic? Nick DeLuca doing speech 108 in front of 5,000 people. I mean, that tells me the guy really came a long way when it comes to leadership.
And it started in the first game right there, Biggie. He was, granted, on a day where the Bison defense was not good, he was their best player by a long shot.
Well, we saw it. He got the interception to begin with. He created 2 turnovers. You see him in pass coverage here. I mean, how many 6'3", 240-pound linebackers you see catch the ball when it hits him in the head? So you don't see some cornerbacks don't make the catches he made defensively.
He'd be a great tight end, wouldn't he? I mean, think about it.
He could play a lot of places, but I just think a guy who made an impact at special teams early on, and he just took that next jump this year. We knew he was talented. We knew he was big. We knew he could run. He became the leader. And when they needed to play defensively, they'd send him on a blitz, and he'd cause a sack.
He normally got home,
or cause a fumble. Just the interceptions. He's just the guy you can move all over the field. And you don't have to ever take him off the field because of his size. Like, he's a big linebacker. You got to take him off the field on 3rd downs. That never happened.
Another tremendous middle linebacker. My Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going up front on the defensive line. A guy who had to take over for Kyle Emanuel. I'm giving mine to Greg Menard. I thought he had a tremendous year. Finished with 10 sacks. All Missouri Valley first team. Kolpack, he had a stretch of 3 games where he had 5.5 sacks in 3 games. You could say, okay, only had 3.5 the remainder of the season. But he was absolutely dominant for a stretch, including the biggest stretch of the year against South Dakota State, UNI, and USD, a game the Bison lost. He just blew past offensive tackles like they weren't even there.
I remember on signing day, we asked the coaching staff on Greg Menard, and they said, always has a motor.
Yeah.
He has a motor, and he did disappoint that at all. I thought he answered the question that we wondered this year: is he big enough? I thought he answered that just fine.
Biggie, how many times did he get to the play and disrupt it like he did there against USD or that Northern Iowa game? This is another massive play late where he got to Aaron Bailey, which nobody could do in that game.
And like you said, you look at him outside of pads or walking around, you're like, is this guy really a defensive end? He looked more like a linebacker, but he had that speed rush, and he was stout enough at the point of attack where he just didn't get
huge play too.
road graded or ran over. That could have been one of another plays of the year in a game that NDSU really needed to pull out. But I agree. When Kyle Emanuel left, you're wondering, where is this team going to get a pass rush? Are they going to have enough pass rush? And especially in the middle of the season while the defense was trying to figure things out, he kind of emerged as that pass rush guy.
Just a sophomore, now hanging into his junior year. Boy, the sky could be the limit for this guy. Already a first-team conference player.
And he's just going to get a little bit bigger, too, and probably a little bit faster.
All right, your defensive player of the year.
I'm going with Captain Obvious, I guess. I'm going with Nick DeLuca. I mean, the tackles in the middle, what was it, 135 tackles. This guy, I thought, just epitomizes what a middle linebacker is all about. And again, we've already touched on almost all of it, but when you have a guy in the middle like that, Joe Glenn, I thought, said it best a couple of years ago. He talked about middle linebackers. He said that's what they look like.
And he also said that NDSU could go anywhere and get anybody they want.
Right.
That was the guy that Joe Glenn wanted from Vermilion and being an Omaha kid. And you mentioned it, the South Dakota game I thought was a watershed moment for a lot of reasons. Obviously with Wentz getting hurt, Stick coming in, but I think DeLuca really turned it on from the USD game on to the end of the season.
And I thought the whole defense as a whole
turned
it
on.
But it starts, again, from where does it start? I thought it started up front. I mean, Nick DeLuca will tell you he doesn't do what he does without Schatz and Tangaway, creating some mess up front. So, give a big assist to those guys up front.
Yeah,
in
give
my
some
player
love
of the
to
year.
the D tackles. I mean, farm tough Brian Schatz. You had the safety versus Northern Iowa. Tangway is just a monster in the middle.
I don't doubt that at all.
Those guys set up the linebackers. But you also need a linebacker like Nick DeLuca who can deliver the goods when they get there as well.
What's the bar for him in his senior year? Mel Kiper, there are already being talks about him for the 2017 NFL draft.
If he improves, the bar's pretty high. I mean, I think he's a type of guy who is an NFL prospect. Just on special teams alone, he's been a very good special teams player since he entered the program. Athleticism at the NFL level is a whole different thing, but he can move pretty well. He's got good hands, so I think he's at least got a shot to be an NFL-type player.
Most valuable player. This is always an interpreted one for the person who has the vote, so I'll have you lead off. What do you got here?
Well, I'm going with some people would say your offensive player of the year. I'm going Carson Wentz as the team MVP. He's a 2-year captain. He just had that. He's the it guy, He's the marquee guy. I know he missed all those games, but they still had him in their back pocket heading into the title game. And his presence down in Frisco, Texas, I thought could not be measured. Yeah, he's 6'5", and he's 233 pounds and has all those accolades, but he's got that presence factor. And that just more than anything was a big lift to NDSU. MVP doesn't necessarily mean your best offensive player and the best stats. I think it's the guy who's most valuable to your team. And when he went out, ask Easton Stick how valuable he was.
I will also, to the looming part, you and I were across the street just trying to see what he's doing. And just that alone, Jacksonville State has to wonder as well. And I know John Gross said we're preparing for him to play, but that specter of him there, thinking, boy, we don't know what we're going to see on Saturday. And obviously he looked like he hadn't missed a beat.
Well, he just added that passing element. Easton Stick's a young guy, and I think he's going to get better at that passing element. The run element was pretty much the same with both quarterbacks, but
not many can do this.
Yeah, Wentz gave that X factor. You see these 2 throws against Northern Iowa. That one he dropped on the dime to the back of the end zone, and I don't know if we're going to see it. The other touchdown to Shepard in the corner. When big moments came, we saw it the last 2 playoff runs. The South Dakota State throw to R.J. Urzendowski, even at the championship game 2 years ago in Frisco, Illinois State, where he made the throws Urzendowski down the field and ran in for the touchdown. I'll agree with Kolpack. He had the it factor.
Your MVP.
I got to go Easton Stick. He went 8-0 as a quarterback. Carson Wentz goes down. This team is 4-2, and you're thinking, where's this headed? I mean, you still thought they're a playoff team, but were you thinking, are they a top 4 seed still? May they have to play that first weekend of the tournament? He just came out, and he didn't make mistakes. He only threw 4 interceptions, completed 61% of his passes, ended up 3rd on the team in rushing. And like you said, his first carry was a touchdown. He started out his playoff run with a 50-plus yard touchdown against Montana, and he went and he beat a Northern Iowa team that NDSU struggled with the first time. Granted, they didn't have a ton of yards, they ended up with 200 and change, but he beat a team that was hard to beat, even with Carson Wentz at quarterback as a freshman.
Right.
I just think Carson Wentz doesn't get back on the field without Easton Stick, and that's why I think he was their offensive MVP,
Kolpack,
team MVP.
Two of those first 4 interceptions came in the first 2 games against Indiana and SIU. So you think of that, he only threw 2 picks over the last 6 games he started. That's remarkable in its own right.
Remember that first half against Indiana State when he didn't look like the guy who was going to lead you to an 8-0 record? It looked like a struggle, but I thought here's a guy who just matured so fast. And again, when they needed him, I thought he was the guy who just elevated his game, to the championship level.
I look at it, my MVP as well. I'm going right with Big E is Easton Stick for all the reasons, and I'm not going to go on because I thought you said it very well. I go to that first home game, though, against Western Illinois. They had won 2 big road games, and Western came in, and they were playing pretty well, Kolpack. You remember, now granted, they lost to Illinois State the week before, and they came out and they just stepped on the throat of the Leathernecks, led by him. And we saw it in that game against Weber State. That's where he got in. Remember, we thought Wentz might not play with the ankle injury, and we saw a little bit of his speed. But he showed it right there to me in that first start at home that he wasn't going to be bothered one bit by the pressure that was on him.
And I think if we give an assist to Schatz and Tangway when it comes to DeLuca, I think you have to give an assist to quarterbacks coach Randy Hedberg on this deal, because there was some coaching to do there with number 12.
And you want to look at the other thing, he was the first 100-yard rusher in a game.
Yeah.
He almost jump-started that running attack.
Agreed.
And I think the backs are like, well, if this guy can come in and rush for 100 yards, we better start running for 100
If
yards
this
a game.
snot-nosed freshman can do this, we better get going. You're right.
Now, this is always an interesting category over the last couple of years we've done this, is most improved. I can tell you we have 3 different guys. So, Kolpack, you can lead off with most improved player.
Well, back in August in the Smoky Mountains of Missoula, we saw a guy named Robbie Grimsley who absolutely just struggled. And he was a true freshman who just didn't belong on the field, to be quite frankly. That defense is tough to learn. It is. I mean, especially for a safety and a linebacker, it is tough to learn. And for a true freshman to come in and try to master it right away, it's tough. But I tell you what, by the playoff time, he was 35 Christian Dudzik. I mean, I thought he was that good.
We just saw in that last play there, he took down Aaron Bailey one-on-one. I can remember a play in the interception there, play in the championship game where he made a tackle in the backfield on Tremaine Pope. He just became a better open field tackler, and I don't know if that was just getting smarter in the defense or just physically getting stronger. But like you said, game 1, it was a struggle. By the time by the end game, he looked like he was a senior.
Can you make an argument, though, that he's a true freshman, so can you be most improved if there's no baseline to say? I get what Kolpack's saying.
Well, if you want to go baseline from where he started at the beginning of the year to the end,
absolutely.
Most improved.
He was really good. I think, and you mentioned it being the 35 that Dudzik was, and he's just a true freshman. 3 more years at that strong safety spot. That's good news for NDSU.
Again, I think it's NDSU's philosophy of putting these really good athletes that get on defense. A lot of, let's say, Big Sky schools will take those guys and make them maybe a slot receiver or something like that. I think when NDSU puts a DeLuca on defense. And they put, say, MJ Stumpf, all these good athletes, when they put them on defense, I think that sends a signal, and it's really, I think, paid off in the playoff run.
Grimsley was an all-state running back at Hutchinson High School. He was Mr. Football, and he was an outstanding running back, and he told me the day he signed, or he verbally committed, I'm going to play in the secondary. That worked out pretty well.
Well, look, another example, Marcus Williams.
Yep.
He played wide receiver in high school.
I mean, he can go up and down the line.
It's just the
Travis
philosophy.
Beck. I think Travis Beck would have been a great offensive player.
My most improved, I'm staying on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going on the other side of the defensive line with Brad Ambrosius. Kolpack did a story on him in the middle part of the season after he visited with Kyle Emanuel, and it really seemed clearly spurred on by your article that he played unbelievable. But I think, Big E, the second half of the season, this reminds me of Emanuel last year, that one-handed play that he had against Missouri State with that pick. He had the sacks up front, 3.5 sacks. I know that number's not going to blow people away, 44 tackles. But he got better as the season went along.
He reminded me of a Cole Jarrett type.
Yeah.
Not going to sack you 15 times, but you don't run over him. When the sack's there, it's there. He gets the interception. Just a rock-solid player at that defensive end. And it was a perfect compliment to having Greg Menard be the pass rush guy and him just be that rock on the other side.
And he had the Jurek Mohawk, I think, in the playoffs.
Well, he looked like Cole Jarrett by the end.
Kolpack, we talked about this back in May when we were doing our position previews. Ambrosius and Menard needed to be big for the losing Hardy and also Emmanuel. And Ambrosius, I mentioned, I thought as the season went along and the moments got bigger, he rose up to the occasion.
Has he properly thanked me for that article yet?
If not, that might be coming in spring ball. How about that?
But you're so right. When it comes to defensive play, I mean,
This was
everything's
a huge
important.
play.
But those defensive ends really, I thought, elevated their game.
He tackled Hunter Wells by his hand, Biggie, and that was a game that he finished with 4 tackles, and he was huge up front in that game against Youngstown. All right, your most improved player. You're staying on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I guess the offense didn't improve at all during the year. MJ Stumpf. Here's the guy who waited his time. 4th-year junior in the program, and he delivered. And he not only got better from last year, he got better as the season went along. I mean, how many times late in the season, especially in the playoffs, where he would just knife through and tackle, a guy for a loss. He had a fumble recovery in the championship game. Here you see him. He just was always around the football.
He hit so hard too. He hit hard.
He was reminiscent of Travis Beck, where he was just always around the football.
Another one there.
Just makes plays, and that's what you want from that linebacker position. He did his role, he filled it well, and he just got better as the season went on.
Kolpack hit the nail on the head. He hits with like a hammer. I mean, every time. There's another one against SIU. He came out of nowhere, a massive question mark. And he said that after the championship game to me. I had only played special teams. I was waiting for my chance to contribute, and he did that in a big-time way in 2015.
And how do you hit hard? Look at that. I mean, sometimes guys just have that ability to square up and hit him at the right spot, and he has that.
And he doesn't look like a big monster. You know what I mean?
He's a big guy, though.
Huge play here.
Yeah. Look at that.
Jacoby Green, welcome to the Dome.
He had the best hair, too. He had the flow. He had
Better
the
than
flow
Bonnet?
mode. Well, okay. He had the flow mode going. He was in the, and I just think the linebacker group as a whole delivered. You lose Carlton Littlejohn, you lose Travis Beck, Esley Thornton, even Pierre G. Tucker's another guy who improved this year. That whole linebacker group as a whole really elevated its game, and that was a huge difference.
And they all come back in 2016, Kolpack, which has got to be a great relief to Chris Kleiman knowing he's got all those guys back for another season.
It's a good starting point along with Tangoy.
No doubt. All right, Biggie, I'll have you lead off with our player to watch. This is a guy who may have contributed and expect a big-time season out of. You need a big-time bounce back in this category after last year.
Yeah, that last year was a swing and a miss.
I went with Kayvon Hawkins. It was between Kayvon Hawkins and Darius Shepard.
Yes.
And hey, maybe Kayvon Hawkins is the guy this year, but I'm playing a little safe this year. I'm going to go Bruce Anderson. Okay. He already is kind of emerged.
He's out there, though, isn't he?
But this is a guy who could be a 1,000-yard rusher next year. I think he can make that type of jump. He rushed for 500 this year. You saw his playmaking ability on special teams. And he might have been the most valuable player in the playoff run just because of those special teams plays he made, especially in the Northern Iowa game. The one in Montana was kind of a momentum stopper, but that Northern Iowa one really changed the playoffs for him. So the guy's 18.
Just turned 18, yeah.
Just turned 18. So I just see him, he's just only going to get better. He's going to get bigger, stronger, and faster. So I think he's ready to have a breakout season.
Kolpack, he became a fan favorite with everybody. Once he got into the open field, obviously that started off. And he makes guys miss almost every time. That's what he did.
Well, number 42, I'm interested to see how he'll go through this winter conditioning, spring football, and then summer conditioning. Here's a guy that has a lot of upside, and good job in recruiting this guy too, because they saw, I think, what the potential was. He was a young kid when they recruited him. Think about it, he's probably 15 when a lot of those FBS schools start recruiting. That's pretty young, and this guy, I think, he grew up before our eyes.
You're also going with Bruce as your player to watch. Tell me why.
Well, just because of the upside. Yeah. I think his upside is just unbelievable. Again, he already looked like a man when he came in. Okay, and now you add the other parts of the program to him, and I'm just kind of curious to see. I think he's going to get a little faster too. They usually between their freshman and sophomore years.
Well, we not only saw that, he caught the ball.
Yes.
He was a special teams player. We saw some.
And he made some tackles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Coverage special teams, not return. There's one, I think, a playoff game where he just squared a guy up and knocked him back 2 yards. He was just. I mean, you talk about athletes. This guy looks like he could play linebacker.
You better have a guy who can kick it out of the end zone, or he's a threat to return it.
To Big E's point, he says maybe a 1,000-yard rusher. Could you see that with all 4 guys coming back?
No, I don't know if there's going to be enough carries. So that's
what
going to
I
be a
wonder
problem.
about.
So I don't know if he's unless they go deep in the playoffs again. But I mean, there's a lot of guys coming back to carry the ball. Look at this guy. He just almost beats the guy who has the angle there.
That was a monster play in that game too, Big E.
I mean, you want to go back to this Youngstown State game. We can talk about 20 plays that swung the season. But that was their offense was stagnant, and he busted that one off, and that was another momentum-shifting play in that game.
A true sophomore coming up in 2016. My player to watch, Kolpack always yells at me about defense wins championships, so you go offense, which I'm stunned with. I'll go defense, and I'm going to a spot where NDSU has to replace 2 starters at cornerback. Jalen Allison is my guy who got in there, started a couple games this season, finished the year with 23 tackles. Obviously, he had the big pick 6 against Montana in the FCS playoffs. I thought Kolpack, he got really good the more reps he got on the field. And he's going to be a starter in 2016. At least that's what we believe going into spring ball, into fall camp. He had so many pass breakups during the season as well, where he got, like this one here against Indiana State, he got in the way of making, and that's against Gary Owens too, of making things happen. Who knows now? He might be the fastest guy in the team. He's a playmaker, though. I think they're going to be okay in quarterback.
I can't disagree with your pick either. That's a good pick because NDSU, it seemed like every game they ran into a receiver who just had these ungodly statistics. And C.J. Smith, after the first game, well, he didn't even play in the Montana game, but after that first game, I thought when C.J. Smith was in that lineup, he by and large shut down these other teams' star receiver. That's hence shutdown corner.
Yeah.
And so I think they need that shutdown corner presence.
What do you make of his season and now him out there, and they have to find another guy at cornerback? Granted, they started that last game of the regular season against Missouri State when Smith and Champion were both out.
We just saw the interception return for a touchdown in the playoffs. That really kind of got the defense jump-started as far as the playoff run goes. And you just see him, he's in coverage, and he was on, Fountain there from Northern Iowa, stuck with him. He had a pass break of Montana. I think he has the skills. It's just a matter, can you consistently do it? Like C.J. Smith, you can count on one hand how many times some guy got behind him. So he's got the physical tools. It's just going to be the consistency. Can he do it week in and week out?
Curious to see also who they pair up there, and that's obviously a topic for another day of who the starting cornerbacks are going to be in 2016.
That's a good question. That's going to be a good spring football story.
Maybe that's number 1 for you then, huh?
Probably is.
We'll look for that in the forum. All right, Big E, final one. This one everyone's been waiting for. This is our 2015 Play of the Year. You can lead off on this one.
I'm going more by what the play meant. It wasn't like a highlight play per se, but the 4-yard touchdown run by Easton Stick at Youngstown State. They had got nothing going pretty much for most of the day. This is the game they needed to win that set up their playoff run. It got them a top 3 seed, and it helped them get home field throughout the playoffs. If they lose this game, maybe they're not seeded. Maybe they're an 8th seed. Who knows what happens? The way they played in the playoffs, it's hard to imagine someone would have beat them, but this is the type of game, and it just showed Easton Stick's maturity. On the road against a very tough defense, you find a way to make that last drive. You get near the goal line, and he scores.
An addendum to that is Bo Pelini going nuts to allow on the
pass
interference
you love
call.
The Pelini meltdown.
Well, it did. It certainly was a major factor in that game. And you remember on that fourth quarter, Stick, who had not been all that great up to that point, was really good in the fourth quarter.
And that's when the good players really come to the forefront.
All right, up to you now.
Well, I'm going back to Bruce. Is this the Bruce Anderson love affair?
It might be for you.
It could be. It's. I go back to the kickoff return against Northern Iowa because this was a play that I thought created separation between these two teams. And look at that. They had him penned in there. And also, boom, there he goes, gone. And that gave them the lead. They would never give up. And that was just the difference right there. And that was the playoff game. That was the toughest playoff game when you look at it. And that was the best play and the toughest playoff game.
I remember turning to Dom right before that. I go, what if Bruce Anderson returns another one for a touchdown?
And I said the dome would explode. The roof would come off.
And it did explode because it looked like he was going to get tackled twice, and all of a sudden he pops out of there, and that was the signature moment of the playoffs.
And maybe of the season. That's a good pick. And to your point, what you just said, I wonder how many teams are actually going to kick to him with that now on tape for 2016. I wonder that.
And he really proved it in the playoffs, returning 2 to the house.
Well, we always talked about, the last couple of years, this team was lacking that Marcus Williams or that Ryan Smith factor. Well, they got it back with Bruce Anderson and even the defensive touchdowns that they were able to score in the postseason, which had kind of been lacking there the last season and a half.
I'm going to go, this might be forgotten in those 2 plays. They're fabulous. Back to homecoming, the middle of October, where NDSU and Northern Iowa played a classic in that game. You and I had just retaken the lead on NDSU in a game that had 5 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, where Carson Wentz hits Darius Shepard with 36 seconds to go. And this is on a drive where he already hit Zach Vron, a ridiculous 4th down play that had to be reviewed, and he was in bounds. And then this Kolpack was just typical Wentz. and Shepard made an amazing catch with one shoulder, as we found out after the game.
Only played one half that game, and actually before the game, Chris Kleiman had the option which half to play. And so because of the pain-killing medication and only last one half, he picked the second half, obviously. Good pick, Coach.
And that's after we saw the earlier touchdown pass that Wentz had to Shepard. I thought nothing would be better than that, and then that happened.
Well, let's go honorable mention, too. That was a great play. All our plays had, significance within the game.
Yes.
If you want to go by pure highlight, maybe the Zach Vrock catch at Western Illinois, where he catches it over the top of the linebacker. That was just a great individual effort. And if that game didn't get so lopsided, that might be a play you think of a player of the year. But the three we chose, it was more obviously great plays, but the moment also was important.
So how about the other honorable mention is my Chris Kleiman walk in the pregame show before the final game against Missouri State.
No, let's just bring it back to Kolpack.
Always,
right? What else were you like in the locker room in Frisco before the game, giving the pep talk to Kolpack? You want to pump your tires some more?
What about prop of the year? I'll give it to him for the tractor.
That's true.
That's definitely the farm tough. When you brought that out for the harvest helmet,
it was very appropriate.
Good work on that.
It worked out great because Brian Schatz always seemed to make a play when I brought out the farm tough. So he must have had some people watching
true,
the
against
video
Western
blog.
Illinois and against Northern Iowa. Both times you did it.
That Northern Iowa safety,
Yeah.
if you want to talk about defensive player of the year, that might be one of them because that really put the bow on that victory too.
And putting the bow on our 2015 football coverage here with our Bison Video Blog Award Show. We hope you enjoy it. For Eric Peterson and Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. Thanks everybody for watching the Bison Video Blog.